Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Oh, there you are. I was hoping I'd cross paths with you today. I'd like to invite you to visit the Storywell. It's a place where storytellers of all stripes gather. From improv performers to authors, screenwriters to playwrights, we all tell stories. But we're not here to talk about craft. We're here to make something out of nothing. Each episode of the podcast, your host, that's me, sits down with a creative person, and based on a series of random prompts, we get elements that we make into a story. Will it be a noir novel about King Kong? Or a Broadway musical about JFK? Even we don't know. That's the fun part. But what do you get out of this, besides a good time with fun people? Simple. The idea is then yours. That's right. Whatever we come up with, we give it away for anyone to use however they'd like, no strings attached. It's like each episode comes with a free prize inside. The Storywell with Kyle Olson. We'll save you a seat at the table.
Okay, now for the lightning round.
I'm so good at lightning rounds. That's from Friends. It's my favorite show.
20 seconds on the clock starts now. Who is the captain of the USS Enterprise?
Oh, crap. Is it, Captain Stubing? No, Morgan? Crunch?
Next question. Which superhero is Tony Stark?
Stark. Did Game of Thrones have superheroes? I only watched 2 episodes.
What planet were Luke and Leia born on?
Planet Fitness?
Oh, time's up. Sorry. And now, a word from our sponsor.
Hey everybody, Mandy Kaplan here. Please check out my podcast, Make Me a Nerd, where each week an incredible guest tries to baptize this mainstream mom into the world of sci-fi, fantasy, and all things nerdy. Available wherever you podcast.
That's our show, folks.
Wait, I just thought of it. Padme Amidala gave birth to her twins Luke and Leia on Polis Massa. No, that's dumb. Is it Planet Hollywood?
I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the next reel. When the movie ends,
Our conversation begins.
Kin-Dza-Dza is over. Either you're going to give us the kitsy right now, or we won't lay you on Earth for less than 8 matchboxes. Cool.
Вот машинка перемещения в пространстве. Так какой контакт мне нажимать, чтобы домой переместиться?
Значит, сработал этот хреновина. Пошли! Тихо.
Так. Вовка, ты где? Люсенька, родная моя. Катя, давай спичку.
А ну быстро все! В корыто!
Это планета Плюк. Галактика Kin-Dza-Dza в спирали.
Играй.
Маймуна Верешвила.
Господин Уэф, я представитель цивилизованной планеты и требую, чтобы вы проследили бы за своим лексиконом.
Соседство с галактикой Kin-Dza-Dza – наша беда.
Дядя Вова, давай еще.
Ку! Вот вывези нас отсюда, а ну тебе ку. Встать!
Ну, скрипка!
Ку!
Strangers in the night, exchanging glances, warm rain in the night. What will the chances shall be for in love? In love before.
Movie has a real Buckaroo Banzai vibe.
Oh, okay. We're going in like that.
So I just want to set the table for my feelings about this movie. I feel like that's coded speech I just gave you, but you understand.
I do understand.
Yeah.
All we needed was a watermelon somewhere in the background.
We needed. You know what? If I were more attuned to Soviet cultural history, I'll bet I could find the watermelon in this movie.
I'm sure it was there.
What'd you think of Kin-Dza-Dza?
I loved it. I had so much fun watching this crazy story. This, I wrote in my brief little summary on Letterboxd. It was totally like right up the perfect vibe for me of like what Terry Gilliam-esque is, and like same with Jean-Pierre Jeunet. Like they've tapped into kind of this grungy sort of creative world building that they do. And I just absolutely love that type of storytelling and creating this completely other world that I was buying into. And it's like everything in it is so absurd, and it's all done so simply and so low budget, lo-fi, and everybody is just buys into it, that I just completely bought the fact that this was a place. And like, it wasn't like I was feeling like these people were about to start laughing as soon as the director called cut. It was something that I bought into, and I had a great time.
The fish out of water story here, where we have a construction foreman as our straight man, and his sidekick, a student violinist, who I might have missed something. I don't think he can play the violin.
Right. No, I don't think he can. I think he was he not an actual violinist? What was the thing? He was a student, and he has the violin because like his teacher or somebody forgot it, and he was going back to deliver it to him.
I totally missed that.
He's walking around with his violin, completely unable to actually play it, but they call him the violinist.
Yes, they call him violinist. It was great, and they together in what has to be the most hand-wavy bit of science excusing fundamental breakage of laws of physics is just that they run into a guy who looks like a hobo, vagrant, wandering the streets, who happens to have a little device, and they push one little button on this little device, and suddenly they're in the galaxy Kin-Dza-Dza. Like, there is just no need to explain anything. The way this movie excuses acts of science is sort of perfect.
Well, and done in such a simple way. Like, we're not getting anything complex when they transport to the planet Pluk, right? They just cut. As soon as they push this device in this stranger's hand, they push the button on it, and Uncle Vova and the violinist, we just cut, and suddenly they're out in the middle of this desert on the planet Pluk. It plays so simply, but also it's just like it was a perfect way to kind of build that and to give us an understanding of how things are going to work moving forward in this world.
Yeah, 100%, because this movie knows before it starts that fundamentally it's only science fiction insofar as it gets us to the satire, right? And that's what it does at its very best. It's social commentary. It's satirizing Soviet society and bureaucracy and social hierarchies through, Pluk's ridiculous caste system, right? And environmentalism, like it's an environmental movie. The desert wasteland of Pluk is counter to the lush jungles of whatever the other place is they visit, Alpha, and even calling it Pluk just sounds disgusting, and Alpha sounds,
Alpha.
dominating. It sounds alpha. It's definitely a materialism movie, right? Like the way they have go so far as to fetishize matchsticks as their sort of currency. So I think there's enough going on in here to the degree that, we might have, us growing up with Monty Python, right? Like that feels to me what this movie represents in its takedown of so many things that represented life in the Soviet bloc.
Yeah, the way that it looks at capitalism, and it's almost like we've watched capitalism progress so far in these galaxies or on these planets in this distant galaxy, Kin-Dza-Dza, that everything has devolved to just these nonsensical transactions and thievery and everything. Like that's all that's left. And it's just like, yeah, matchsticks and everything. And like we learned that the Chatlanian planet has been completely sucked dry essentially of everything, right? When we finally get to that planet, it's just like barren. You can't even breathe on it. The oxygen level's like 2%. And they're on the planet Pluk, where language has even devolved to just really two words. There's ku, which is kind of every word, and then there's ku, which is like, some sort of a cuss word, even though it's like something that they say when they're irritated about something, and that's it. And then like this whole planet has been also completely, like, all the water on it has been sucked dry to create fuel. Or what is fuel? Loot. I'm forgetting all my words. Lutz is fuel.
Lutz.
And now they've hit this point where there's no more water, so now they actually have to start reconverting the Lutz back to water so that they can have something to drink. It's like everything has gone so far off the rails down this road of a capitalist society that it's just like one step past idiocracy, right? I mean, that's kind of where we are when we get to this place.
I think that is a great, great, great comparison, right? Idiocracy. Which I think if you were, hanging out in Soviet bloc 1986 and saw Idiocracy, I wonder if you would get the same feeling.
Yeah, right.
Of what? That's what Americans think of their society, right?
Right.
I mean, it's the same. It's in the same space.
And you also have all the nonsensical interactions, like the required interactions between the caste system that they have here. You've got the Patsaks at the very bottom, and they always have to greet the Chatlanians when with the little coup and the little sit dance that they do.
Yeah.
And then if you see somebody in yellow pants or red pants, although we never get to the red pants, you have to do it twice, right? You have to do the whole thing twice. And then there are the ekolops, which are essentially the government or the police. And everybody,
Gestapo, even.
Exactly. Everybody has to submit to them. And so it's just this nonsensical system that it's fun to watch our two outsiders try to figure all this out. And, even Uncle Vova a few times is like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. And then he, has to pay the consequences and learns his lessons. And it's interesting, eventually he's right there with them, standing in a cage, doing his little sits and everything to placate the leaders.
Well, and that, I think there are two areas here that I think are most incisive takedowns. And caged art is one of them, right? Because there's a line in there that says, wait, not everybody who performs doesn't have to be in a cage on your planet, right? That's how this place has evolved, that any free expression of music or performance has to be done, at least in some part, in a cage. That just screams so loudly about the authoritarian approach to free speech that, I found myself really quite moved. It's also very funny, but I can see how this movie has taken on such resonance over the decades since its release, because it's doing things like that. It's putting people in cage. And Stanislav Lubishin, our construction foreman, how quickly he adapts to performing in a cage, right? How quickly he adapts to the state expectations of performance, limitations of performance and speech. It's fascinating. The other thing I think that goes along with that, you've already mentioned, is like language and communication, right? Exploring how language shapes society through this Plukian vocabulary, basically taking away all words except for a few to describe how this community is allowed to communicate.
Right. Yeah.
It's outstanding.
It's such an interesting way to use science fiction. And that's what, I shouldn't say it's that interesting, because this is often how science fiction is used, right? To look at our own society and create a futuristic version of it that is really kind of a takedown or kind of like breaking down what's right and what's wrong in our own society. And we're definitely seeing that here. And I think it just speaks to the strength of that entire genre and how it can be used in such smart ways. Creating this world that isn't some fantastically futuristic society in another galaxy, which is what we usually see, even in Russian cinema, right? Other sorts of Russian films, we're seeing things that are much more futuristic and impressive. Here, we're seeing this very much dystopian, even kind of lower than the George Miller dystopian future, where it's like they're not even interested enough to like create these vehicles and fight each other. It's like that's also too far. They're probably too lazy in this place. They're just not going to get there. And that's what I think is so funny about the way that Daneliya crafted this story with his co-writer Revaz Gabriadze and made this kind of takedown of looking at how this society can continue evolving if we keep going down this path that we're on.
Let's talk briefly about the production design and how it speaks to what you're talking about, right? Because they don't have cars and road battles. They do have things that fly, right? They have these ships, sort of.
The peplats, right?
The peplats, and they dress in drabs. Some of them have electronics, right, for their costumes. They have light bulbs, in particular the Ecolops, that have light bulbs on their heads. I can't even. I'm curious your take on how those things represent what Daneliya was going for, like just pulling together these trash assets to make a movie speaks to something, particularly when I read that, in fact, they didn't have enough light bulbs and had to appeal to none other than Boris Yeltsin to get them. There's something like really ironic about that. We're trying to make a movie that takes down everything that we have, and we're going to need more light bulbs. Boris, can we have them?
Which is funny because the vinegar that they are carrying was actually vodka, but Gorbachev had some policy at the time that said you can't be featuring that, and so they changed it to vinegar for the script. So yeah, it's funny how they had to make all of this work, and just they filmed in the Karakum Desert, which is in Tajikistan, and I guess it was incredibly hot during the production, which made it difficult. And they had their own not Tajikistan, it's Turkmenistan. Yeah, and they also ran into just general production issues because they were filming out in the middle of a desert. Like they brought their ship accidentally got sent to the wrong city. And because of just the way that the bureaucracy worked in Russia at the time, it took a month to get it to the right place. So they had to film around the ship for a very long time. But the desert works perfectly because it does feel so barren, and you can buy it as an alien landscape. It's got these strange like rock formations jutting out of it in various places. And sometimes it feels more of just kind of a sweeping desert with dunes. Sometimes it just feels very harsh and rocky, but it always felt alien. And I think that's something that worked really well for me in the way that it played. And then just, like you're talking about, like the production design of like these ships and everything, everything just feels ratty and used, and it doesn't feel sleek. In fact, to the point where they had actually consulted with a company like that does aerospace engineering to help design some ships. And then they felt that they were way too realistic looking and opted to not use those and go for a much more kind of, I don't want to say nonsensical, but just, I guess, nonsensical in the fact that, an actual space vehicle, they just look like spare parts is kind of what they look like, and all look rusty and like they're not really working right. And I think that's what ended up making it feel so perfect for this society where everything has to be done by these barters and trades, and you're lucky if you can find a gravitsapa in order to do what you need. And so it made it work really well.
It is a society that has been constructed in a way that everybody is just adapted to the fact that nothing is safe, right? Nothing feels safe. Everything you do is sort of taking your life into your own hands, including stepping onto this ragtag ship that just sort of skirts around the desert, let alone going into space, which is why it's lucky that they end up being able to just teleport to places. That's an aspirational bit of technology that's clean and apparently safe. And so, I think there is this sort of savior figure who it turns out was the guy that they found early on, that actually sent them to this place.
Like the homeless-looking guy. Yeah.
The homeless-looking guy. He comes and offers them a respite. He says, I found you, and I can send you back. Like, let's do it. But, of course, they choose not to go because they're embroiled now, and they have to find another way.
And that is interesting because there is this sense in this society of our two aliens, we'll call them for the sake of our conversation. We've got
one of them is Soviet Bob Hoskins. Am I right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, it's perfect. Their names are Wef and B. You kind of get the sense that they wouldn't necessarily have done the same because of the way that their transactional society works. But I think that Uncle Vova, feels a kinship with these two, which might be new for this type of planet, but he wants to actually make sure that he's able to pay them the matchsticks that he owes them. And later in the story, he wants to actually rescue them from this nail-less cell that they have been put into so that they can be freed again, and tries to even get them to come to Earth. And I think that's what's so funny is like he sees that as a value, and they look at him like, why would we go to a planet where people don't even recognize the value of, what to do when you see someone in red pants? Like, that's kind of their response. Like, what a silly society. Like, why would we go there? I think that just speaks to the kind of how far their society has devolved, where they don't see any value in being on Earth, even though it's full of matches. Like, that's just, they're not going to get the kowtowing that they want, I guess.
Right. And full of matches it is. There is something about match math that I find hysterical in this movie. It is a recurring joke that they keep coming back to how many matchsticks these guys are going to owe Wef and B because of the support that they give them. And it's to the tune of thousands and thousands of matchsticks.
Right.
And occasionally we drop into conversations in play and we hear, look, I have this much money. The violinist says, I have this much money. I can buy 1,000 matchsticks with this money. It just, I find it so non sequitur and kind of perfect. When I say that this has big buckaroo bonsai energy, that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. Like, it feels to me like this movie was of a kindred spirit, that kind of humor. It's incisive. It means something culturally, but it also can come off as just straight up nonsense.
Yeah, and that's the danger that a story like this has, right? Of it's creating so much nonsense over the course of it, from the little kowtowing sit, slapping your face, saying coo and bowing and throwing your arms out, from that whole greeting that you have to give to somebody who ranks above you, to the vehicles, to like the silly words that they're saying for everything, and to the conversations about matchsticks, everything. Like the way that when they come upon the woman who's riding on her own little vehicle across the desert, and they have to play their music for her across the vast space between them, and she's like, hold on a second, let me turn the sound on, whatever, and she flips some switches so that it can amplify their music so she can hear it. Like, there's just so many of these things that it could be seen as just utter nonsense as you're watching it. And it takes actors, they're really required to be able to latch onto all of this in a way to play it realistically so that you feel that it's just part of the world. and it doesn't just turn into silliness. And that's a tricky line when it's kind of this absurdist type of comedy that they're creating here. Like, you have to believe that these people exist in this space or it's just not going to work. And I buy all of it. And that's, I think, they've found that space to do it, and it works really well.
Well, and I think this kind of humor really expects that, right? It expects that I'm going to be able to suspend disbelief because it's at such a degree of disrepair. Like, I don't expect it to be a James Cameron movie. So in fact, the barrier to entry for me and my imagination is much, much lower. Right. My expectations are very, very low. Like, okay, he's wearing a light bulb on his head. He's police. I get that. Like, that's fine. And I think that makes it funny. So in some respects, it's easier to get me into a movie of this caliber than it is to get me into a movie, a big effects movie, a movie that would have taken this much more seriously. But I think where the movie holds up is in its delivery of the satire, right? Of the stuff that is calling attention. The fact that it was almost censored because of the word coup, because coup is, they thought might be a reference to Soviet leader K.U. Chernenko at the time, who might have taken some offense to his name, moniker, being used in a way that, spans respect and disrespect. Who knows? Which I thought was interesting.
It plays as an interesting example for what we're getting out of the Soviet Union in their science fiction stories, right? It does something unique in the way that it's looking at the society and playing it up in a very kind of black comedy sort of way, which we haven't really had in any of the films that we've discussed in our Soviet sci-fi series across the years. Like, we just haven't. I mean, there's been kind of weird moments like the head cake in Zero Grad, things like that just are like, well, that's kind of like they're going in this really kind of absurd space here, but it's never been like funny, like laugh out loud funny. This film feels like the first time where they're allowing it to also be filled with this humor through all of it, and it works. I mean, like they land on planet Alpha, and our two aliens are immediately taken so that they can be brought to the underground lair or whatever it is and turned into cactuses. Like, that's the sort of story we're getting here.
Yes. Well, the underground stuff, right? The bunker stuff. There are a couple of sequences that I think are particularly funny. I guess I should take a step back. The entrances to the bunker stuff, like there's a Return of the Jedi sequence where they go to the pyramid building in the desert, and the little door keeps coming out. He has to like spit in it to get access to this underground bunker. I thought that was really, really funny. Some of those choices were funny, but they go into the underground bunker, and it's a world that's so dominated by sand that sand is both what gets them in and what gets them out. He pulls this lever and fills this bunker that seems like 20 stories into the ground. It looks like silo, right? And he pulls this bunker and sand just pours down into this thing. That is an area that I would not have expected a movie like this to be able to accomplish, right? A practical effect that I would not have expected it to accomplish. It looks really good, and it feels larger than the movie could do.
Right. I was taken by that as well. Like the fact that they build this bunker. I mean, we see them walking in it, so I'm assuming it's the same space. I mean, it's entirely possible it's just a smaller model version that they then fill with sand. But it looks perfect, and it plays really well as they're trying to escape this place as it fills with sand. Likewise, just the way that their pepalats would fly through the air. It just looks like kind of a levitating salt shaker. It's kind of what it looks like this thing that just moves across the sky. And I always was wondering, like, is it a helicopter that is like has this thing on wires, and the helicopter is just high enough where we're seeing it out of frame? But I never see any wires.
We don't see any sand.
Right. Yeah. So I'm always curious about like how were they accomplishing the effects to make this stuff work? The only time it looked a little cagey was on Alpha when the Alphians take the ship and like they open up a hole in the ground and drop it into the hole in the ground. That was the only time where it had some early computer sort of effects that just looked a little rough. Otherwise, I'm always buying it. And perhaps that also boils down to the simplicity. Like when they're doing things, it's disappearing, reappearing, and it works.
Yeah, I think the sand potential model work, the potential model work of the flying ships or compositing, whatever they're doing, they did to a very high degree to my eye. Like there's nothing that took me out of the movie. Nothing.
No, yeah, right. I buy all of it, which is pretty amazing. And I think also it helps that it's so run down. Like everything looks destroyed. Like this planet clearly looks like it's been sucked dry. We end up at this weird amusement park sort of place where they end up performing to get some extra chattels so that they can buy this gravitsapa. And they're performing out front with their little cage and doing the terrible, terrible music that they're making, which makes it all the more funny.
Yeah.
But they just are creating these spaces that feel very real. It looks like this post-apocalyptic sort of amusement park that they're in. Like I'm buying these spaces that they're in.
What's the deal with the nails
in the little cell?
Like toward the end, well, there are the troughs on rails, right?
Yeah, those are little jails that they put them in, right?
The little jails on wheels. I'm interested in. Like some of those things, there's got to be a reason that there was a guy whose job was to take nails and set them upright in the bottom of those troughs, and that there wasn't a more sufficient or more robust system of penal work. And so I was curious about that. That felt like a thing that I didn't quite. I wasn't able to relate to because of the void of Soviet cultural history.
Well, they're called etsiks, and they are boxes that you imprison somebody in. And if you want it to be a harsher punishment, then you add the nails, an etsik with nails. And so it's got to be incredibly painful to be put into one of those when it's full of nails, like a bed of nails sort of thing. Some of the nonsense words that we have as our language here are actual words. Some of they made up, like gravitsapa is a word that they made up. Etsik is actually Georgian, which actually means prison. So I don't know if it was a term that they took kind of describing kind of the harsh realities of some of the Soviet prisons. Like, is that what they're saying here as to like how horrible it is to be put into a prison? Because it's truly like you may as well be trapped in a little box on a bed of nails. That was kind of my sense of it. Yeah.
And then they put you on rails and swing you around.
They go store you. They
store you. Right. Yeah.
It reminded me of the much more futuristic version of Minority Report, where they would put prisoners in, like Tim Blake Nelson had that whole room where it would you'd put you into like a deep sleep, and they would just put you in a little tube and you'd be stuffed into a little container, and then you were just stored for eternity, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah, all of that stuff worked for me to some degree or another. I think that the stuff that ends up not working as well is a me thing. I think this movie carries a lot of weight. Any particular performance you want to call out? I mean, is there a way to isolate really strong performances in this movie? It's such an ensemble goofball piece.
It is. I mean, it's, looking at Stanislav Lubshin, our lead, Vladimir, or Uncle Vova, I think that he carries the film largely with his kind of like the way that he largely plays it is like shock is the wrong word, but just kind of like bewilderment at the realities of what's going on here and the kind of disgruntled nature that he has to start taking in order to actually participate. And eventually he does. He full on does. He's got a couple moments, though. One where he suddenly gets to actually call home to his wife. And this is when they're in the records room or looking at the interplanetary catalog to figure out where Earth is. And he gets to call his wife. And it's this really, it's kind of funny, but it's kind of painful because it's like he kind of wants to explain what's going on, but also acknowledges how stupid it all is going to sound. Like, he can't just say, well, I pushed a button and I ended up on another planet in a distant galaxy and I'm trying to figure out how to get home. Like, he can't do that. And so it just plays as this kind of painful phone call that probably just feels like it means nothing to her. Like, what's going on? Like, why are you being so weird? And then that's it, And then the other time is later in the film when he's getting a little teary-eyed as he's, thinking about everything that's gone on. And I think that he just has a few moments where you just get this sense that he's connecting to all of it.
Yes. Yeah, I think his is the performance that is kind of the most compelling, only because right, as the straight man, he's our reaction to absurdity, and he lets us in by his ability to adapt or not to whatever he's dealing with at any given moment. Where we've seen him, right? Didn't we see something else with him?
Stanislav Lubshin.
I'm dying here because I'm looking at his IMDb and I felt like we saw him in another one of our movies, but I can't figure out which one it is.
I don't think so. He's not somebody who I recognized. That's not to say there wasn't something, but yeah, I'm just looking at his filmography. I don't see anything either.
Yeah, I'm wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. But he has a face that I think works well for this sort of thing.
He really does.
I liked him quite a bit.
He looks he's got a little Daniel Craig in him, if I'm honest.
Yeah, there's something about him. I've got to also call out Yevgeny Leonov, who plays Wef, the Chatlanian of our two aliens. You already called out kind of like that, the look that he has of, who did you compare him with now?
Soviet Bob Hoskins.
Soviet Bob Hoskins. Which, yeah, there is this kind of this sense of him that works so well. I guess he is a very prominent Russian actor, Russian comedian. He provided the voice for the Soviet version of Winnie the Pooh, which I think is funny.
That sounds exactly right.
Right. Like, there's just something about his face and just the way that he played in this world that worked so perfectly for me. Like, I had a blast just watching him in the film. He was just a really great performer. I guess he was so beloved. He was actually, when he died, he was actually on the way to the theater to perform in this play that he was in. And they announced it that he had passed away on the way to the theater. The whole audience ran out, flooded into the church across the road, and they all lit candles in mourning. And when they had his funeral service, his memorial service, 500,000 people turned out in freezing conditions for the procession because he's so beloved in Soviet culture. He's even on a postage stamp.
Wow. Well, I think it's funny that he is, like, when you look at all of his bios, they all showcase, even though these guys, including Yuri Yakovlev, they have over 100 credits in IMDb, and they are, all their bios are, these guys are known for Kin-Dza-Dza and, one or two other things. But that just goes to show the sort of cultural resonance of this movie to a people that is, so much beyond what I can catch.
Right. I want to talk about the structure of the film for a minute, because it was interesting to me that we have part one that plays, up for a while before suddenly cutting to snowy Soviet Russia, as we're back with Gedevan, the violinist, as he's talking to this woman at his school about why he's been gone for 6 years. And he's trying to explain to her the complexities of everything that happened. And he's passing off to her, look, this is a chattel and this is a piece of metal. Like, he's constantly stealing things. Like, he's the funniest character because he's, always thinking about, like, how will we prove to this? Like, to the point where he's trying to steal the entire little prison box with a prisoner in it to roll it out so that he can take that and look, like, we've caught one. We can show everybody this now. And it's made of this metal. And like, it's so funny. And he's explaining to this woman, and she's like, why are you giving me this junk? You've been gone for 6 years. What do you expect? Like, just the disbelief in the situation. And it's kind of obviously, like, much later in the story, And then that ends part one. Part two actually starts with a glossary of a lot of the words that we've been hearing. And then we continue the story. What did you think of the way that we had this structure set up this way?
I'm glad you brought that up, Andy. And I feel like it was an important way to deliver the movie to us, because the first part of the movie, we are as lost as they are, right? We are as lost as the travelers. And then, just as we start to get a sort of handle on what's going on, they unlock it. They give us the Rosetta Stone, which is, here, we're going to confirm for you what you may have already figured out, what these like 5 words mean in this language, so that you now are as up to speed as our intergalactic travelers and can chart the rest of the course of the film. And I thought that was really smart in terms of just playing with me as a participant in the experience. What'd you think?
Well, and I agree. I think that's exactly why it worked so well for me. In addition, I think that had we ended the film with Gedivan's moment talking to the school person, it's not as powerful an ending to have. Like, it's an interesting bit to include there, and it gives us a sense of the closure of his story with the violin and everything, but it's not really the emotional core of the story. And, where we end the film makes much more sense for the actual end of the emotional journey of, getting everything figured out and getting back home. And like when they see each other on the street and they have that moment of recognition of like Uncle Vova, the violinist, and the kind of teary-eyed greeting that they have, it's so much more impactful having it wrap up that way.
Yeah, I think so too. It's really an artful choice to break it up that way.
Yeah, just very surprising to do it, but I wasn't expecting it, and it was kind of a surprise to suddenly get all those words, like the little glossary. I'm like, oh, okay, interesting. I like the way that
Here's your intermission. Go study, right?
Right, exactly.
That was great.
Yeah,
I thought that was great, and it's one of those examples of where this movie's kind of punching up outside its class, right? Like it's a smart bit of art that's not just funny.
No, right. Well, and to that point, like something else production design wise that we haven't talked about is the way that they depict cemeteries, where it's like this giant balloon in the sand. And they're, because at one point Gedivan is playing around with one of those. It's like, don't do that. What are you doing? You're in a graveyard. That's somebody's grave. It's their last breath. And I was like, that is such an interesting way to depict like your end, right? Like, we've captured your last breath and here it is. It's filled this balloon. And this is how people.
And then he lets it go.
And then he lets it go, right? Which is like, oh, geez. But then what I thought was so interesting is how they use that to satirize the leader of their society, right? The one who has that giant balloon in the distance that we see, and all of those people are working to keep it filled. And it speaks to this ridiculous worship of one of their leaders like that, and how you have to placate them in order to be allowed to kind of exist at the level that you're existing at.
Yeah. The movie cuts pretty close to the bone, satirically speaking.
Yeah.
For Soviet bloc, leadership.
That felt like one of the closest
yeah.
like digs.
Yeah. Very, very close.
Right. Especially when we get, I think if memory serves, I think he is actually, because he's not even dead, he's just having them do that to kind of prepare. But he's the one in the bath, right, where he's got like the Patsak like bending over him, like cooing at him, and he's got some weird device on his back, and it's just like, and then these other people in the room, it's just this nonsense. Like, what are these people even doing? Like, it was just so dumb, and that's like these ecolaps, all of these police and the government people, they require all of these people to kowtow to them, but it's all in the most inane way. Like, none of it really means anything. It's just nonsense.
This movie came out in 1986, right? Now, Georgiy Daneliya he was born in 1930.
Yeah.
So he actually got through Khrushchev's thaw that we talked about
Right.
last week, right?
Right, yeah.
Where he was able to do some more things in the 60s and make some more daring films, apparently. I haven't seen any of them, but they were apparently quite popular. Here we hit 86 and the thaw is over, right? Brezhnev came in and changed things culturally in the Soviet bloc. And this movie seems like such a daring middle finger to Soviet art, to the production of Soviet art. I don't know, as I think about this movie, how he was able to get away with it. I don't know how he was able to get away with it.
Well, it sounded like there were some things that they were, like really feeling like he might have gone a little too far. And it seems like in some of his other work, he had gone too far and kind of had to pull back a little bit. And so I think that, I don't know, I guess it's just one of those lines that as a Soviet, you always have to dance with. I mean, we talked about this a little bit with in our Movies We Like episode where we talked about Mirror, Tarkovsky's Mirror, and the idea that the way that they have to pitch these things, like the Soviet government looked at that film as, maybe saying some things that he shouldn't. And he was just like, it's just autobiographical, like trying to kind of spell it out as to like that. And like the way that you have to, as an artist, repackage your stories in ways that they'll buy it. And it just seems like it's a delicate line to walk.
Well, it's so funny. I was scrolling YouTube and ended up on this video of Kristen Bell. It was one of those like Vogue or Vanity Fair actor unpacks their most important roles, right? And Kristen Bell is talking about Frozen, and she says they're showing her the scene where she's dancing and says, what good is a ballroom with no balls? And she says, I have no idea how we got that joke in there. Like, of course we're talking about testicles. Of course we are. But we were able to tell people that it's ballrooms, parties. We just mean parties. And they bought it, right? Often, like, censors are just looking for an excuse.
Yeah, right.
Give me a plausible excuse why I can let you have this. I don't think the same thing can be said for Soviet censorship.
Probably not.
but I do think the point stands.
Yeah. No, very true. Like I especially knowing, well, as an outsider, somebody who's never been to any part of the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, it's all my Western idea of what it's like. But I feel like it's actually more dangerous to also put some of those things into your work that could be seen as subversive because, you could be spending some time in prison because of it, and again, it's just my Western expectation of what, the harsh realities of Russia is like. Maybe it isn't quite that bad, but it feels like it is.
I feel like it is because that's what we've learned from movies.
That's right. That's what yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. This movie came out in 1986. This is the peak of our anti-Russia hysteria, right? Like,
yeah.
Well, we have Rocky IV, where he's going up against the Russians. We have Red Dawn. And so I think that you're getting this sense of, at the time, of the real division between these two countries and the different ways that everybody operates. It's very...
War games,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very different.
Yeah, it's interesting. And it gets to why this movie is so important, I think, internationally, because what it sells is, look, we don't love it either, right? Like, we live here and we don't understand it. It's bizarre. It's bonkers how we got to this place. We don't love it.
Well, but also I think one of the ways that they're able to sell it is because I feel like so much of it is looking at what capitalist society is like, and so it's easy to say this is where all these idiot capitalists are going to end up.
Yeah, right.
So
this is a movie that's poking fun both directions.
Yeah,
right. We're poking fun at our own leadership, and also ideologically, we don't agree with any alternative so far presented.
Right. Everything sucks. which definitely feels like, yeah, that may be actually what he's saying. Is like, there's really no hope at all anyway.
Excellent.
Oh
Excellent.
my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Solved international relations in Kin-Dza-Dza.
No, a really fun movie. I'm really glad to have had it on the list, and it just makes me want to dig more and more into more of these types of Soviet films because they're just so fun. And I definitely want to look more at Georgiy Daneliya and see what else he's done, because obviously there's a lot of films in his career that are looked at very highly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
maybe another series in our future.
Hey, maybe. All right, well, we'll be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Mr. Mustache, Anthony Vega, T. Bless, and The Professionals, Oriel Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm. If your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. Do you ever find yourself stranded on dusty, desolate planet, desperately craving a hit of KC and wondering how you'll ever get back to Earth? Sounds like you've accidentally stumbled into Pluk, my friend. Do not worry. You don't need malfunctioning Kravitz-Tapa to escape this predicament. You just need the Next Reel's watch page. We're talking about Kin-Dza-Dza, that gloriously bizarre Soviet sci-fi satire from my homeland that is more relevant to today than ever. If you just listen to our episode and you are itching to experience or re-experience the dystopian delights of Pluk, its eccentric inhabitants, and the constant threat of being turned into a cactus, look no further. Our watch page is your one-stop shop for all your Kin-Dza-Dza viewing needs. We have compiled every known peplot route to this cinematic gem. Whether you prefer convenience of Amazon or sleek interface of Apple, we've got affiliate links that beam you straight there. And yes, using those links help us support the Next Reel family of film podcasts, so you'll be showering us with more charts than a Chatlonian at the KC Bazaar. Think of it as your good deed for the day, or as they say on Pluk, a coup. But wait, we understand not everyone relies on the mega capitalists for their entertainment. That's why we also include just watch links for all other streaming services. So whether you're a diehard Patsak or a privileged Chatlanian, you'll find the perfect viewing platform for your needs. So before you resort to begging my comrades Whiff and P for a lift back to Earth and risk being forced to sing that infernal bell song, head over to the Next Reel's watch page at thenextreel.com/watch. It's the only guaranteed way to find Kin-Dza-Dza and avoid a lifetime of scraping lots from the desert floor. Trust us, your Kravitz-Tapa will thank you. Now, if you'll excuse me, must go find some more matches. Cool! Sequels and remakes, Andy. Are there more of these movies?
Believe it or not, this is what I find so interesting. In 2013, Daneliya actually came back to Kin-Dza-Dza to make an animated remake of it called Kin-Dza-Dza. This animated version was based on the original, but targeted more for younger audiences because that's who really, when it first came out, that's who was drawn to it. Younger audiences are the ones who really gravitated to the film. This one had a budget of 140 million rubles, and it won Best Animated Feature Film in the 2013 Asia Pacific Screen Awards. It's mostly traditional animation with some computer animation, and I guess because it's animated, Daneliya was able to really kind of expand the universe more with some interesting visuals and everything that they couldn't when they were filming the live action version. So it's on YouTube in Russian. You can do that auto subtitle and then auto translate. So it's kind of a trick to read as it goes along, but you can try that. That one does seem to be available. So
Interesting. All right. Put it on the list.
I'm curious to check it out.
How did it do at award season?
It wasn't big. It had 3 wins with 1 other nomination. At the Fantasporto Awards in 98, it won International Fantasy Film Special Jury Award, and it was nominated for Best Film but lost to A Chinese Ghost Story. I'm not sure if it was 98 because that's when it finally reached some of these areas. I'm guessing that's the case because it didn't really make it very far on its initial release. Also, in the Nika Awards, which are the Russian Oscars, it won Best Sound and Best Music. And, we didn't talk about the score, but I loved the score to this. It was like this, it was so catchy and incessant, and it worked so perfectly for the nonsense of this world.
Oh my God, 100%. It's hard to get it out of your head, especially that. Well, then they start singing that silly song.
Silly song with the terrible violin playing.
Yeah.
Yeah, loved it.
How to do at the box office. Now, I am sure that as you were editing all the detail, you converted our entire AppFM spreadsheet to rubles so that we can get a fair comparison.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, actually, man, I thought last week was rough. At least I did have some sense of that one's popularity through admissions. For this film, I have even less. No idea about the budget. This movie opened in the Soviet Union December 1st, 1986. And like I said, it was kind of a bomb with adults, but it really found its stride with the youth. In fact, so much so that the youth culture in the 90s actually, as slang for your car, they were calling it pepalats. Like they really adapted to the film and took in a lot of kind of the vibe from it and everything. It did play in a few other countries around Europe, but not well. Apparently, it played really well in Japan, though. It opened in 91, but there was never a release with English subtitles until 2005, when the Russian Cinema Council finally released a version with an English dub. Since then, subtitled versions have been released, and I have no idea, unfortunately, though, how any release actually did. So we just have to celebrate the fact that we're watching it and not worry about the numbers.
Maybe that's what that Alphaville song, Big in Japan, is about. Maybe it was about how well this movie did in Japan.
That's right.
The circle is now complete.
It's so funny.
Well, I'm glad we watched it. I thought it was hysterical and a great ode to an era of Soviet life and cinema that I thought was really rewarding.
I loved it. It was, it might be my favorite of all the Soviet sci-fi films that we have talked about on the show. It just fit that perfect vibe for everything I love. Like this would be another of my Buckaroo Banzai films had I seen this when it came out. It's right up my alley. So great.
For sure.
Yeah. Well, we'll be right back for our ratings, but first here's the trailer for next week's movie, kicking off our Jack Ryan series. It's John McTiernan's 1990 film, The Hunt for Red October.
The most brilliant commander in the Soviet Navy.
Ramey has trained most of their officer corps. He's nearly a legend in the submarine community.
The most deadly submarine ever built.
This thing could park a couple of 100 warheads off Washington. Nobody'd know a thing about it until it was all over.
And once more, we play our dangerous game with our old adversaries, the American Navy.
His plan is a mystery.
A man with your responsibilities reading about the end of the world.
Apparently, he has suffered a kind of nervous breakdown in which he announced his intention to fire his missiles on the United States.
We want us to help you hunt him down, kill him.
Open the outer doors, firing point procedures. We sail into history.
I'm going to blow him right to Mars.
Ramius might be trying to defect.
You're just an analyst. What can you possibly know what goes on in his mind?
I'll give you 3 days to prove your theory correct.
I am not field personnel. I am only an analyst.
You're perfect.
I'm expendable.
He's defecting. You willing to bet your life on that?
From the best-selling novel by Tom Clancy. From the director of Die Hard.
Give this man a chance.
My orders are specific. Battle stations.
Sean Connery, Alec Baldwin, James Earl Jones, Scott Glenn, Sam Neill. The Hunt for Red October.
Greetings, fellow cosmic wanderers. Ku to you all. I am a lost soul adrift in the vast expanse of the Tentura, much like Uncle Vova and the Violinist from the distant planet Earth. My Pepelutz has run out of Lutz, and my Gravatsapa is on the fritz, all because I lack the necessary chattels to make repairs. But fear not, my fellow Patsaks. I have discovered a way to make our arduous journey through the cinematic universe a bit more bearable. By becoming a member of the Next Reel family of film podcasts, we can gain access to a wealth of exclusive content that will make even the most hardened ecolops sit up and take notice. For a mere 5 chattels per planetary rotation or 55 chattels per orbital cycle, you can enjoy ad-free episodes as smooth and uninterrupted as a freshly tuned Pepelats gliding through the Antitentura. No more worrying about unexpected advertisement interruptions ruining your listening experience. Just pure, unadulterated film discussion. But wait, there's more. As a member, you'll also gain entry into the hallowed halls of the Discord chat, where you can mingle with fellow cinephiles and discuss the finer points of film without fear of accidentally offending a high-ranking Chatlanian. Just remember to perform the proper sit greeting when encountering any yellow-trousered individuals or ecolops. We don't want any trouble with the Translocators, do we? And for those truly daring souls, membership also grants access to the extended episode editions, where you can delve deeper into the movies you love than a visitor can distinguish between Patsaks and Chatlanians. It's like having your own personal guide from the enlightened planet Alpha, sharing their cosmic wisdom and movie-Lutz-fueled insights. So what do you say, my fellow Patsaks? Will you join me on this epic quest through the Kin-Dza-Dza of film analysis and discussion? Just head over to truestory.fm/join and press the kappa to sign up. I promise it will be more rewarding than a game of Ketsa with WFNB. Cool to you all, and may your journey through the cinematic cosmos be filled with wonder, enlightenment, and plenty of Lutz. For your Pepelats, of course. Keep an eye out for me. I'll be the one in the tattered coat, sitting and cooing at every ecolop I meet. Together, we'll find our way back to Earth and share the stories of our filmic adventures. Cool!
You know what one of my favorite things about this movie is that I don't think we talked about, but we're talking about the economy. Like, they have just set the table for the fact that the matchsticks, shaving all the little precise matchsticks stuff, is the most valuable thing in the cosmos. And what's his name keeps lighting cigarettes with them. Like, he just spends them.
Right.
Just like, talk about a capitalist metaphor. I don't know what else to say about it. It's just really, really
so little
incisive.
Yeah.
Commentary.
Such a 1%er.
Really he's a 1%er.
Literally burning his money.
Oh, God. Well, that brings us to Letterboxd.
Oh, yes.
Andy, how do you approach this movie in the Big LB?
I loved this movie so much. I'm really torn. Like, is it straight up a 5-star or is it just 4.5? I think I'm going to say 4.5 for now. And it could go up on rewatch, but 4.5 and a heart, I think, is a great place for me with this one.
I'm going to sit at 4 stars because no half stars, but for the very same reason. It's a 4-star for me. Imminently watchable. Absolutely, I will go back to it. I had a blast.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we didn't even talk about the fact that the director is the head alpha that we meet when we go to Planet Alpha.
Yeah, right.
I laughed about that. I'm like, what is he saying about that? The fact that he is the best of the alphas.
Yeah. The best of the alphas.
That made me laugh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's good.
Such a great movie. I absolutely am going to be revisiting this one. It's just one of those movies that just kind of clicks right with exactly what I want to see. So
for sure.
Well, remember, you can find me at over on Letterboxd at Soda Creek Film. You can find Pete at Pete Wright. And of course, the show is at The Next Reel. So what did you think about Kin-Dza-Dza? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
What did I say? 196 fans of this movie? People have this in their top 4?
Yeah, 198.
198 out of, what'd you say, 9,600
No, sorry,
people have watched this
168.
movie?
168.
168 out of 9,600.
Almost 9,600, yeah.
Not bad.
No,
Not bad.
I don't know.
I have a 5-star that I would like to share with you.
Oh,
and I think this is by a representative to the UN from the former Soviet bloc. Why you want to watch capitalist physics fiction movie so you can see special effect to impress girlfriend? You not need expensive movie by Christopher Nolan where cowboy Matt McConaughey tried to save world with NASA Space Mobile. You not need Galaxy Protectors by Cartoon Mouse who acquire comic books for 3 billion rubles, more than average Russian bean cannery. Go watch quality movie. A fine Soviet film by Georgiy Daneliya with story Georgiy Daneliya where strong Russian construct foreman and weak Georgian students sent to desert in Kin-Dza-Dza. Watch star actor Stanislav Lubshin and Ivan Abrodzi walk around desert on planet Pluk and use matches to buy fuel for space travel. You laugh at Patsak with bell nose and dancing scheme to get monies from Catalanians with yellow or crimson pants that require a double coup. You cry when heroes go back for space friends to fight Ekilops instead of head back to Earth to families. You not need movie of American capitalist made for girl. Go watch movie from 1986 like Great Soviet Man. That's exhausting.
It is hard to do, yeah. Yeah. For those of you who are members who are listening, you may want to go listen to the public version of this so you can hear us do our ads. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Wow. Those are a piece.
Yeah.
Great stuff. I switched mine.
Oh.
I'm actually going to do 4.5 and a Heart by Jenna Ipcar. Oh my God, I love this so much. This is like if Mad Max was directed by Terry Gilliam on a tight budget, but written by Alex Cox and the Buckaroo Banzai guy. All at once, cyberpunk minimalist insanity with the absolute driest sense of humor, all the while dunking left and right on capitalism, but in space. The world building in this is effing amazing, though. You learn a vocabulary that's larger than Dune's and yet somehow easier to wrap our head around. It's almost like a 2-hour culture immersion course. Like there's straight up customs and inventions and bartering systems and holy crap. Some lines in this made me legit laugh out loud. What's the difference? One's green, one's orange. What are you, blind? That made me laugh out loud too. Strangers in the Night, and most of all, the Violinist deadpans deliveries. And other times it was just so stupid I couldn't help but laugh. The flashing light hat alone is still making me laugh out loud to myself like an idiot. I love all the rusted-ass trash can TARDIS flying machines. In general, the sets in this are amazing. Where the hell was this shot? I can't imagine these weren't all just on location, though in some dystopian-looking warehouse somewhere in Russia. The music in this is also hilarious, catchy, and ridiculous. I loved it. Wow, what a hidden treasure. Now I need to get everybody I know to watch this so I can quote it to them. There you go.
It is, I think it is on YouTube, but there was something wrong with the captions.
Yeah, it's on, where else is it? It's like Canopy, right? Here in the States?
Yeah, I watched it on Canopy. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway.
It is one of those, and actually Deaf Crocodile released a very beautiful Blu-ray of it. So if you're in the mood for purchasing it, you can find it there. They've got a great edition of it. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Deaf Crocodile.
Yeah.
And of course, thanks, Letterboxd. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, Or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way.